On today's video, we're going to talk about the continued silver breakout. We're going to talk about silver stacking. We're going to talk about the 2025 Libertad. And of course, our centerpiece today, the 2006 Libertad. We're going to go into detail on that coin. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Titty Hunter. So before we talk about silver breaking out, just a heads up, you got to do your own due diligence. This is not investment advice. Consult a professional before making any decisions. But anyhow, silver's continuing to break out. SLB, which is the ETF that essentially mirrors silver spot price, has crossed 40 today, and it's not showing any signs of letting up. What's interesting is if you just take a look at the volume profile, we had almost 32 million in volume today. Last Friday, almost 37 million, and so forth. So this is essentially Yahoo Finance. You pull up historical data, you kind of get an idea of what the opening price was, closing price, and the intraday high and low for the day. But what I wanted to point out is I pulled up the 2011 daily right when it topped out in 2011. And what you can see essentially is around the start of the month of April in 2011, the price of the SLV ETF essentially started to take off, which mirrored the silver price. And it really, by late April, is when we started to see a top where it reached 47 on April 25th. It crossed over into a 48 on April 28th and 29th. But look at the volume. The volume's different. The volume starts to get really high, over 100 million, close to 200 million. And then already once it's kind of topped on the way down, you even saw 200 million and almost 300 million in the beginning of May. So the volume profile is not showing any signs of topping. Although, and this is why you have to do your own due diligence in the very, very long term on the silver chart. And this is one of the folks I follow on X. His information's there on the bottom right to his website. But this is a great chart. It's a long-term chart, quarterly chart. It kind of weeds out the noise, the nuances of day to day, and you kind of get to see the big picture. The interesting thing about a cup and handle, and this is kind of the contradiction, is if you want to start to see a really sustained breakout at this line here, you need volume. You need a lot of volume. So it is going to be interesting, per se, that when volume does go up, it's kind of a paradox that you will need a lot of volume to have a breakout, but at the same time, high volume could indicate an impending correction. At the same time, the silver and gold miners, they're really starting to take off. So what you're seeing here on the candlestick chart for CDE, these are monthly candles, essentially shows the range of the price that has from when the month started and where we are now compared to prior months. And back in late 2024, early 2025, you really had these massive volume spikes. So that was when the big boys were accumulating, and now prices really starting to climb. So these massive volume spikes, historically looking back, they're just enormous. So things are just climbing. When we start to see volume spiking again, that could be folks taking profit, and maybe time to take some profit as well. But this is it's a great idea. If this is the sector you believe in, not only having exposure to coins, but also to stocks, ETFs, and whatnot. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about stacking, and outside the Libertad Coins community, two other big communities I follow where there's a lot of stackers, whether straight up generic, 90% silver, bars, etc. There's Wallstreetsilver, and then from Wallstreetsilver, there was a spin-off, the SilverDegenClub, and essentially there was a spin-off. Surprise, surprise, the the guy that created that Wallstreetsilver was a used car salesman, quite actually a used car salesman. So apparently there was a bunch of shenanigans with the money that they fundraised for like doing ads on billboards throughout the United States and whatever else they used the money for promotions. But there was some shenanigans being played. I honestly don't know the full story, but then I know kind of there was this SilverDegenClub spinned off. What I find interesting, and I wanted to talk about this specific topic today, is those two subreddits focus a whole lot. Um, let's just click on one of them so we could see it. They focus a lot on just buying ounces. I'm gonna buy lots of ounces, and they have these memes that if you buy, like 100 ounces, you're considered an ape. If you have 500 ounces, you're this animal. If you have 1,000, you're that. And then like the biggest one is a whale, and it's like a picture of a whale. I don't know if it's 5,000 or whatever it is, but the thing I noticed is these two subreddits focus a lot on just straight up ounces, gotta get ounces. They're just obsessed with loading up on ounces. Here's what I wanted to talk about. This is Amex's page, and it's for basically the product page for a 1 ounce American Silver Eagle, random year, and it kind of gives you, okay, this is what the price is, this is what it's going for. What you don't see here, and I wish I had a screenshot, but what happened was in the run up in 2011, when silver really started taking off, and I do predict this will happen again, and this run up on the major product pages, major products, we're talking about major silver sovereign coins, American Silver Eagle, Canadian Maple Leaf, then you got the Britannia, you got Kookaburras, you got Kangaroos, you got Libertads. So big major sovereign mints. Those coins during that run up in 2011, what you had was, obviously they're selling, and they would have a button here on the page, buyback button. Essentially, they will pay you X amount of dollars. They had a very specific number that refreshed as you like you click the refresh button, you get a new price as spot prices changing throughout the day, but it had a buyback price. And the interesting nuance about it is, I remember it well. Let's say the spot price of silver was 50. They were selling at 55. And they were buying back at like 52. So they were buying back at higher than spot. So a lot of these folks in those subreddits are just obsessed, and they'll load up, and I mean load up on massive quantities of generics. But guess what? Apmex and the buybacks for the common generics, there's some common like those silver buffalo one generics. Amex has its own generic rounds. In the buyback buttons for those generic items were below spot. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, like ounces. I gotta have ounces. At the end of the day, you have to think about liquidity, and you have to think about what are folks willing to pay when you actually want to sell. If you have just pure generics, you're going to have to sell at a discount to spot. That's going to be the highest bids will be discount to spot. The highest demand will be the major mints of sovereign countries throughout the world, coins I told you about. Those are the ones with the highest demand and the ones where you see buybacks higher than spot. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. I would gather most Libertad collectors were aware last week that Apmex was having live auctions for the silver Libertads, the alleged Libertads that are egregiously low mintage, record low mintage, but yet we have not seen any official published numbers on Banco de Mexico's website. There's even some folks out there who are now going back and publishing that the 2025 1 ounce BU mintage is 300 again, magically overnight. First, they told you it was 500 with a quote unquote official watermark on the pictures they were sharing on social media. And now magically they're back to 300. It's a miracle. So what I found interesting, I was on those live auctions just to listen. I had zero interest in bidding. I mean, I will not pay these prices. I'd rather go buy call options in silver and gold miners than put these barbaric amounts of money into these. The interesting part is a lot of the guys gassing up the 2025s had the biggest skepticism and worries when a 98 1 ounce proof would show up out there. The biggest hesitation to bid those up, but zero reluctance, zero skepticism to bid these up. And I mean, the 98 proof 1 ounce, 500 mintage. Why was there such reluctance by these experts, these self-proclaimed experts, to get in on that? The other Apmex shared that same story. I talked about it in one of my earlier videos that, you know, Banco de Mexico was upset, because they were left holding the bag on a lot of 2023 and 2024 inventory. And I mean, I mentioned it before and I'll mention it again. It's funny that Apmex brings that up, but hey, Apmex, like I said in the last video, for the first half of 2023, when they were minting those 2023s, spot silver was around $23 to $24 per ounce. And in the first half of 2024, when they were cranking out and minting the 2024s, spot price was between $25 and $29 an ounce. So you tell me we're at we're at over $43, $44 spot price right now in silver. What is Banco to ever do? They must be so mad sitting on all that inventory that's appreciated sizably, all that profit. Oh my God. It's so upsetting. I don't want to mint any more coins after that, right? And the last thing I'll say, and I mean, I hope it doesn't happen, but you can have coins that are the darlings of collectors 1 year, and then a couple of years slip by and they fall out of favor. So I would be cautious to the folks who make these decisions on the mintage, especially for BU coins. You should really reconsider. And the case study I'll give you was when I started collecting around 2008, silver Chinese pandas. Those were the big things. Everyone loved it. The pandas were the darlings of all the new collectors, and the premiums were up there. And the premiums now, if you look at going Apmex's product page for Chinese pandas, they're climbing back up. But from where they were, like from 2008 to even like 2012 or so, like the premiums on Chinese pandas were high. And then they just fell out of favor. It was just like folks are like, I don't care about these Chinese coins. Who cares? And the premiums just dumped. So it's just a warning to all the folks who are involved, all the decision makers, to reconsider what they're doing. I mean, would you really want these coins to fall out of favor? There's a lot of posts already on Libertad coins in the Facebook groups, and Instagram and folks like myself, I will not buy a 2025 BU. I simply will not. At that price, I have better things to do. I'd rather buy some backdates and watch them appreciate multiples more than let's go look at the 1 ounce BU price. Look at that. A MS69 NGC graded 2025, $10,995. How much do you expect that to appreciate versus if you put that amount and bought like a whole bunch of tubes of 2023s? What's going to happen? How much do you really think this is going to climb when spot silver is 100 versus buying tubes of 2023s or 2024s that Banco de Mexico is so upset to have so many on their hands? So let's talk about the 2006 Libertad. Last time around, we focused in on 2005. 2006 really shoots up in terms of scarcity, and within the top 10, it's actually tied with two other years, the 96 and the 2020 at a 300,000 mintage. So it is a relatively scarce coin. And at 300K, we expect to see higher prices when we look at the eBay comps. Let's go take a look now at the population reports for NGC and PCGS. So let's start off with PCGS, just because I've followed over the years more than anything NGC, and I have a lot to comment on that. But on the PCGS side, There's 304 of them graded with the top pop of 69, and there's 83 of those. So that's the PCGS side. And unfortunately, I've mentioned in the past, I never really jotted down old data for the PCGS side, so it's hard to tell what the trend has been there. But moving on to NGC, so it is 304 versus NGC has 335. And the top pop is also a 69. And there's 97 of them. And 97 is actually sizable. And as I mentioned, I do keep tabs in Reddit. If you look at my old posts, I have 6 months ago when I last talked about the 2006 1-ounce silver Libertad. At that time, the top pop was, of course, still the MS69. And 6 months ago, there was 51 of them. In 2023, there was 33 of them. And in 2021, there was 26 of them. So it was relatively hard to get an MS69 for 2006. But if we look at what I said 6 months ago, there was 51 of them. So in 6 months, we went from 51 MS69s to 97 MS69s in the last 6 months. So it's always what I'm telling you. If you're a new collector, you don't want to get stuck gambling on having to pay top dollar for a top grade that can fluctuate very drastically from 1 month to another when there's massive changes in population like this. You're better off getting a lower grade that will pretty much be sticky in terms of the price of silver, and price appreciates and the coin itself will appreciate, not only because it's anchored to the price of silver in a way, but because it's a numismatic rarity. It's much more rare than other sovereign silver coins. So let's take a look at the silver eBay comps, and just knowing that the 2006 is in the top 10 in terms of scarcity, even the raw 1-ounce 2006s, we should be expecting higher prices relative to some of the earlier years we discussed in the 2000s. And so we got one here, September 21st. It's a raw one. You could tell it just by the picture. I don't even have to zoom in that there's some imperfections there. And that one sold for $159.99. You have another one here the day before on September 20th, sold. And that one actually looks like it's in better condition than that one. And that one sold for $209.95. September 19th, 2006 graded by PCGS MS68. Really start to see the price fly. That one went for $400. Another raw one in September 19th, $169.99. A milky one on September 18th, $162. And then you really start to see that, top grade. Here's a PCGS top grade MS69 went for $750. And yeah, it's big bucks, but just be cognizant that, as I mentioned, the populations in the top grade change drastically. And I have seen wild swings on the going rates when that happens. In the long term, if you're a long-term collector, it kind of works itself out. If you're one of these people that says, I want to be in the NGC or PCGS registry and I want to be known as a top ranked collector, it will pan itself out in the long term. But in the short term, you may not be getting the best deal just based on those dynamics. As I showed you, we saw the 2006 in 6 months, MS69 went from 51 to 97 on NGC. So just bear that in mind.